here. We're here in the woods somewhere.
Yeah.
Ready to have this conversation about life
Deep thoughts,
and things.
I can't help but notice like my producer brain is on of like, okay, is this too loud? Like I'm getting pulled away.
But you got Adobe Podcast AI.
Yeah.
Can fix anything. And it's gonna get that noise out of this podcast.
Yeah. So real quick,
Yeah.
to open up, because this is something we don't know what it is exactly.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like a podcast based on the camera angles and the setup.
Mm-hmm.
But how did this come about? Or let's maybe talk to the people. One viewer, my mom watching. Who exactly are we? Why are we doing this? Like, what is this exactly?
Right. I mean,
Who are you?
there's a few
With his
different
glasses. Good-looking guy over here.
I'm all right. No, I mean, my name's Jesse Ovalles. That's the thing, it's so hard to define because I want to say I'm a videographer, but I'm trying to do other things.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I guess at this point I would consider us content producers,
Yeah.
more or less. But, you know, I've been doing video work since high school, technically. That's pretty much where I started to get interested in it. Went to college for it.
Yeah.
And then I worked for a few studios and ad agencies in the city and pretty much gained enough experience there to one day say, like, you know what, I want to try this out for myself. I want to do this on my own. And fast forward a bit, started a wedding videography business. You know, that went pretty well. And as well as working with different like corporate clients and commercial clients. And now I'm just at a point where I'm like, what's next? You know,
Yeah.
like what's the next evolution beyond videographer, essentially?
So
is
not
where
to
I'm at.
age you, but just so that way
I'm old.
just to also, because like I hear all that, and as I'm getting older, you see a lot of these guys with success or that are doing things in the business, and you can't help but be like, oh man, like I'm not as good as them, or they got lucky, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Like, just to justify, right? You said high school. High school was how long ago for you?
High school, I graduated in 2008, so
Okay.
a long time ago.
Yeah, almost. I'm doing quick math. 12 plus 3, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Right. So like for young guys that obviously we live in a content world now where everyone wants to be a videographer, content creator, whatever you want to call it. You know, they look at a guy like yourself and have great experience and is very professional in the industry. And at least for me, like that was that imposter syndrome of just like, oh, like I can't be like this guy. He's probably on year one too. So what's the point of even starting? I'm not good enough. And it's like, I think we lose sight, or people don't touch on it enough, where it's like, you have been in the industry, you have learned the ins and outs, and this is why you're to where you are today.
Right.
It's funny, I want to touch on the word videographer. It bothers me when people, when they ask what you do,
Right.
the last thing I want to say is videographer.
Yeah, no, I know. That's why I'm like, I don't know what word I'm going to use here because I mean, videographer, cinematographer. There's a few different words we could use, right?
It's like, why does
But-
producer have such a good tone to it? At least in my opinion. Is that just me?
Yeah, no. I mean, I feel like it adds. Yeah, it's. I don't know how to say it other than it's like a
it's
step
not-
beyond. It's like.
Because it's not clear, right? Like
Yeah,
a
yeah.
producer, what is a producer? You hear a videographer, it's a guy that probably works the camera.
Right.
Producer, it's like, well, what is that? There's mystery to
Right.
it, and then your brain starts to be like, well, it does a little bit of that, does a little bit of that. I don't know what that is exactly, but you can't help but be
Yeah.
like,
Well,
you
for
know.
me, like the reason why I say I'm transitioning to more producer role is because I'm starting to think more in terms of teams as opposed to the individual, and I feel like videographer, cinematographer, it feels individualistic. It feels very much like you're this one guy that's going to come in and film and create for your content. But producer, I feel like producer has this air of it of like, you know, I'm bringing on this team and we're going to do things at a higher level, to a higher degree that you can't achieve on
Yeah.
your own necessarily. So that's where my mind goes.
I definitely think, let me ask you a question. Do you think, but I don't want to get too far away from our introductions, but do you think for someone that sees, oh, this guy's involved in that, and he hears the word producer and goes, I want to be a producer, do you think that he can just get to producer? Or do you think producer is like almost like a video game achievement where like, what's in COD, like Prestige Master or something like that? Like you don't just hit Prestige Master day one.
Right.
Like you end up being, you know, a commander or whatever the titles are.
Yeah.
But you work on those ranks, and I can't help but be like, a producer is just a videographer, a content creator, they've done pre-production, they've done so many different elements that a producer taps into before they get there. Or do you think like I can just say, hey, I want to be a producer tomorrow?
I feel like it's not always the case, and everyone has their own definition. That's the thing about our industry, right? So many people define things so many different ways. But for me personally, in order to be a producer, you have to understand or have a good level of understanding of every aspect of the business or of what the creatives are doing. Because I think of it as you're the chef, right? Like you're putting together the meal, the ingredients, and then like your sous chefs, like they're getting like all the pieces together for you, let's say. But my thing is, if I don't have an understanding of what an audio guy does, how he has to do his job, the cinematographer, the editors, how am I going to know how it's all going to come together? And mind you, I've seen producers that have never touched a camera in their lives and have never been on that side of things. And just based off my personal experience, I feel like someone in that position doesn't quite have the level of insight that I think would be required to really take things to another level and to really to keep things efficient. So that's why like I'm very passionate now because I was on a trajectory for a while that I thought I was just going to be a videographer, video editor. But, you know, for me, now that I've experienced doing a little bit of everything, I'm like, I feel like I could take on more of a leadership role where I can help creatives get to that next level because I know what it's like to be in their shoes.
Yeah.
At the same time, I understand those business and organizational elements involved. So I used to have a term for this called the creative suit. That's kind of like the mindset that I took on after college. I called it the creative suit because in Hollywood there's the creatives, then there's the suits, right? That's usually how it's always been divided that way. But I think thanks to social media, thanks to the way things have evolved over the last 10 years, you can do both. And you can get educated in both. And that's kind of like the mindset I took on after college, where it's like, I don't want to just be a creative, but I also don't want to be 100% business. Like, I want to be this hybrid of both. And that to me is that's leading into this producer type of mindset.
Gotcha. So, I just want to go back because I couldn't help but like I wanted to really touch on that videographer name role, like how that whole world works. But going back to introducing yourself and explaining a little bit more. So, what you're now doing wedding business. You're now doing what else are you doing? Like,
well, now I'm trying to put together pretty much like a separate brand that's going to be focused more on commercial and corporate production for different types of businesses. I'm still fine-tuning all that, but I definitely want to essentially start building out different brands for different niches. Is kind of like where my mind's going right now.
Gotcha. And I assume that wasn't always the case, like day one.
No. So I didn't even know I was going to do weddings. That's the thing too. Like weddings is something that I'd actually never. So when I first graduated and I was getting into the industry, I always said I would never do weddings. I used to say I will never do weddings because there was like, I guess there was this air to doing weddings where it's like.
Was there a negative stigma around it? Like people always say, oh, weddings.
It's like it kind of. It's like, oh, you're a beginner, because it seems like a very beginner-ish thing to do. But also, I feel like in the cinematography world, you're not as respected because you do weddings, because, oh, you're not doing films, you're not doing commercials, you're just a wedding guy. Like, that's kind of like the feeling. So, at first, I resisted it too, because I used to have that mindset too.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that after I started doing weddings, there's actually a lot of skills that I picked up in that industry that have translated into other areas of my life. Like, I feel like I've gotten better at speaking to people, working with clients, handling the business side of things. You know, as you know, all the different kind of personalities you have to deal with, as well as just how crazy a wedding day can be compared to other shoots. I feel like, and I'm sure they've said this in other platforms too, but like once you get good at doing weddings, everything else starts to feel a little easier than that because it's just the days are so filled with so much stuff. And now, like I used to go into wedding days kind of stressed,
anxiety,
like super anxious, like, but now it's like I go into it and I know what I'm doing, and now that I've mastered that, any other kind of shoot to me is so low stakes or feels low stakes, even if it is high stakes.
I think the biggest thing is like it requires you to be present, right? And I want to sort of, just for the sake of the conversation and thing, I don't even like. Part of me is like I love this combo, but I'm like. My brain is like, okay, people don't know who I am, or like,
we gotta talk about you because I don't know why I'm talking to this guy in the woods.
Exactly. Why are we in the woods?
I sat down and he just started having this conversation with me.
I said, hey man, I have 3 cameras set up. I have a 3-camera angle set up. I said, you don't look like you're doing anything. Can you have a seat?
So who are you?
So my name's Brian. Brian Cruz, if you want to have my government. I'm 23, and I always say that because I don't know why. I say it, but I just say it. I almost don't want to say it.
No, I think it's
because it adds this level of like, because people tell me, right? You hear it all the time. It's like and I feel like this is the bad thing to think about. It's like, oh, you're so beyond your age or whatever they say. But then you get so caught up in hearing that you think it's like, oh, I have to let people know I'm 23 because and it's like, I don't want people to know that or be known for that. I'd rather it being this like, oh wow, like I didn't know.
You don't want to like almost stereotype yourself.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah. So forget I ever said that. Like I didn't say that. But I've been doing this since I was like 17, 18. So 5 years or less, 5, 6 years. Started as, before content creator was a thing, it was all about, hey, creating cool videos online. So I said, hey, I'm into fitness. A buddy of mine owned a gym. Shout out Iron Alpha. He gave me a shot when the pandemic. This was pre-pandemic, so I was already doing photos, trying to pick up girls, do model shots, right? Hit up girls, hey, model, right? And so doing photography for them, photos of cars, and then through that, realizing pandemic happened, hey, I want to pick up video. So ended up picking up video. Tried to hit up different companies. At this point, I dropped out of college to pursue anything but college, and trying to figure that out. So picking up video, had photo under my belt, and said, okay, how can I make money? So you're watching a bunch of guys, Peter McKinnon, all these online creators, and it was like, how do you make money? And 18-year-old kid, drop out of college, your parents are trying to push that pressure of you, like, hey, you have to do something.
Of course.
And I had to prove to them, like, hey, how can I make this sustainable? So I hit up local businesses saying, hey, I do photos, I could do video for your business. And then I ended up reaching out to a company that specialized in entertainment, weddings. And so that was a whole, like, it was interesting because I was like, I had no interest in doing weddings either until, I'll be honest, until the financial reason of like, okay, my goal is to prove to my parents and prove to just myself that I can make this sustainable. And weddings is something that it sounds like it has more of a recurring, everyone's getting married.
Well, it's kind of a recession-proof industry. And as we saw, it's almost pandemic-proof.
Yep.
So it is pretty safe when it comes to that.
So knowing or not knowing much, I was just like, hey, let me shoot for that. And so I ended up reaching out to a company that I offered a promo video for, but ultimately I came to them and was saying, hey, I want to be like your main video guy. It's like, cool, show us your portfolio. I don't have one. It was like, I just expected you to sort of like give me this. And it taught me very quickly, like, you need to create your own opportunities. And by just using with what you got, right? Like, the one thing I've learned recently was you may not have much skill set just yet, but one thing you do have is time. And a lot of things, when you start to get into that higher level skill sets, time becomes scarce. And so when you are able to tap into something that says, where you can talk to an owner or whoever your target audience is, and you're able to show them how much time they're going to save by doing something with you, because you're going to take on that role or take on that duty because it has to get done, it's valuable to them. So ended up, I think I told you the story, right? Like of how I got into weddings and all that.
Yeah.
So, but ultimately, trying to speed this up, got into weddings, ended up proving to myself or proving to the company, hey, this guy could probably be a main videographer for a wedding. And at that time, like, I think my first gig, like video I ever did was like $200 per video for a 1 minute highlight. And it would go on Instagram and they marketing material. I packaged it. I said, hey, you have marketing material. So then, afterwards, there was an opportunity that came up to go out to Dominican Republic. And the reason why I want to like touch on this as part of like my story and before I get into, what I do today, is because one thing that I see a lot of people do is discredit like opportunity and taking in the opportunity. There's a level of entitlement, I feel like. And when you're young and you're hungry or you have pressure on you to succeed, you'll almost do anything for nothing.
Yeah.
Like you literally would do free gigs.
Oh, yeah. I've been there. I mean, like, man, like, so the first 5 years of my career, like after graduating from college. So it's interesting too, by the way, touching on that, like, because our stories are different in the sense that we're examples of the two different paths that you could take, I would say. Like, okay, college and no college, right? But I came out of college with this video production degree, this creative degree, and couldn't get a job. I had to start from scratch. And
were you expecting that, I assume, when you graduated college, like, hey, I'm going to get a job after this?
Yeah.
Or it was known that it was like, hey, it's pretty rough out there.
I mean, what was fed our whole lives, and what I felt was going to happen was that, yeah, I have this degree, so I'm going to get a job.
Yeah.
So speaking of that level of entitlement or that sense of entitlement, like for me, it was like I felt entitled to get work, but that was not the case, and I had to work for free, do a lot of internships. This was before. I guess they made it illegal at some point where like everyone has to get paid minimum wage or something.
Okay.
Don't take that verbatim. Don't.
Don't fact check us.
But this was before like there were more regulations against that stuff. So yeah, I was working for free for like 1 or 2 years, like a really long time, building up my portfolio, my experience, all that, and then transitioning into finally get a job. And this is the weird thing about podcasts. I lost my train of thought. What was it supposed to? What was the last thing that we
We were talking about just college and opportunity, or what I mainly wanted to cover is like we live in a world now where everyone's entitled. So
Yeah.
like back then, just touching on, being super hungry because I had a lot of pressure to like, hey, you don't have college, right? If
Yeah,
you're-
yeah.
And that I come from a traditional Spanish household. Like you're supposed to be the kid that goes to college, completes college. Like quitting college is not okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you have to really come up with something or prove to your family like this is. You need to have something good.
Yep. Yep.
And so just going back to like having that sense of entitlement, like it was like forget ego, forget about. I don't even want to like. I would almost say like forget what it's like to be treated with respect. Like you're
Right.
in that mindset of willing to do anything.
Yeah.
So-
Okay, so that's what I was saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, like those first 5 years, I was willing to do anything to the point of like, looking back, now knowing what I know now, I didn't do all that. Did not do that.
I mean, what? No.
But looking back, knowing what I know now, I could have skipped a lot of steps if I wasn't so willing to just be like, yeah, I'll keep working for free. I'll keep doing this cool stuff for free. If I would have like had that level of like, no, like these are my boundaries, or like this is the respect that I deserve, and that there was a certain point that I could have skipped a few steps in the sense of like not just
Do you though? Because I not to. I just want to argue the point
Yeah,
of
yeah.
like you. When do you find that out, right? And
Yeah.
for me, I created a boundary when I got tired. When you
Right.
get burnout,
Right.
like that's the biggest thing. Is you start to do it so much where you start to realize like there's something off here. I'm looking at it's been 6 months, and this guy that told me online that I need to do free work for 6 months and I'll start to see success, but I'm not seeing that.
Right.
So the questioning, when it starts to question, when reality sort of sits in and says, hey, this is not working out, that's when you take the skills. I think it's super underrated still.
Right.
It's like taking the skills of what you learned in that 6 months and now saying, hey, let me put a price tag on it.
Yep.
I have a certain level of respect for myself, or a willingness to work at this minimum level. A new term, shout out the future for this term, but minimum level of engagement. So like, what are you like? You're not willing to step out the house unless you're at least getting this. It could be a meal,
Yeah. Yep.
right? It doesn't have to be thousands of dollars.
No,
But
no.
you have to have that minimum level of engagement for yourself. And once you get from that free to fee state, I think, but I feel like that doesn't happen unless you experience setting boundaries. So I'm very curious. In your case, you're saying you could have skipped certain things. What were those things? And then trying to also keep in mind, like, if you didn't do that, would you have the opportunity that?
Well,
tied
that's
in?
the thing too. Like it's a paradox, right? Because at the same time, I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't go through those experiences. To then, like you said, eventually be fed up and be like, no, like this is how I'm doing things now.
Yeah.
But for me, it's like I guess I was working, or I was in situations where I wanted to do more than I was being allowed to do in those spaces, or I guess I felt limited.
And you're talking more specifically about the marketing. When you
Yeah,
were
like
doing
when I
marketing.
worked at different agencies and studios, just feeling limited, feeling like there's so much more that I'm capable of and able to do, but not being given the opportunity to do so. And at the same time, doing the same type of work over and over and over and over and over, and hitting a point where it's like nothing I'm doing is creative. I got into this industry to be creative. I got in this industry to help people, to help clients, to help with creative solutions and things like that. And that's a big reason why I ended up freelancing, is because I love that face-to-face, one-to-one client interaction. I love that personal, level of engagement that you don't get when you're working for a company, because you're creative who has to go through a producer, who has to go through executives, who has to go through a client. It's this whole chain
Yeah.
of command.
Yeah.
And you end up sometimes being a part of almost like a conveyor belt. I don't know what's the word here.
Assembly line.
Assembly line. You end
Yeah.
up being like a part of an assembly line where you're just doing the same kind
You're
of
just a
work
number.
over and over and over and over.
Yeah.
And it's like, and then meanwhile, these companies are promising you that one day you're going to be this creative. One day you're going to level up to this, but like when you're not holding up your end of the bargain, showing me the steps. You're not giving me a plan, an action plan, showing me how I get to there. So I just hit a wall where I was like, I'm ready to figure this out on my own because I have the skills, I have the tool set now, and I have the blueprint by working at these places. I have the blueprint.
Yeah.
Now I can go and execute it on my own.
So one thing I want to touch on, and as well as for myself as a reminder, like, let's maybe cover what are you currently doing today? Like, what is your, like, Jesse about, like, elevator pitch? What do you do, right? And then because I think I'll be, at least myself, like, I'm messy in my own storyline of like, I haven't even talked about what exactly I do today.
Right.
And just to cover it briefly, so my company, Of All Frame, helps health and wellness brands specifically to create content or an online presence online. I wasn't able to say that until I did 5-6 years of weddings and all these freelance jobs to then determine, okay, this is what my company does. So what is it today that Jesse Ovalis does? You covered, you have a wedding business. What, in that commercial side of things, have you figured that out yet? Like, what would you tell someone in an elevator pitch?
Yeah, sure. So for me, my goal is to produce content. Right now, I'm focusing specifically on education. So we're talking schools, charter schools, colleges, as well as health and wellness clients. And my goal is to help them produce content that's going to get them results, that's going to give them an ROI. Strategy. However, I'm not taking an agency approach in terms of like all in one, like I'm going to do the strategy. Instead, I want to partner with people like yourself. But I want to see myself as like one of Evolve Frame's production partners or producer partners. Like I'm going to come in and I'm going to make sure that the production side of things goes off without a hitch, that things are going to, all fall in line, and that's going to fall in line with what the client needs to actually give them results.
Right.
So for me, coming from the ad agency background, I also have an MBA in advertising as well. So for me, it's like taking that strategic side and bringing it into the creative and not just being purely creative, if that makes sense.
I think what you said was fair, like a creative suit. I
Yeah.
like that because like I now more than ever, I'm more getting involved in the suit side of things when all I did for 5 years was creative. Like I didn't make any money.
Right.
And this is like the first year where I'm actually starting to make money because I've been so focused on the suit side, but I wouldn't be able to focus on the suit side if I didn't have a creative background to help with that.
Yeah.
Okay, so one thing I want to touch on is our relationship, right? Like, how do we know each other?
I just met you right now, dude.
I know.
Came out
Like,
the
well, how
woods.
did fate bring us here?
So it's funny. So again,
Do you remember how we met, Jesse? The first time meeting?
so this is the beautiful thing too about having done weddings. At least I feel like, again, like there's a little bit of a stigma to it, I guess, within the industry. But one of the things that I love about it is I've met so many great people through doing weddings. Like I really have. Like a lot of my favorite creatives I've met doing weddings. And then you yourself, I put an ad out one day looking for a second videographer to help me out.
You were more. I remember it.
It's like a bat signal.
Specifically, it was like a good-looking guy. He's 5'8", wears glasses. Yeah.
And you delivered.
And I delivered. I showed up.
And you delivered, and you were there. And then you did a great job.
What was your first impression? Like, I'm
hope.
curious. I don't know if we had this conversation, but like, I'm curious. What were your initial thoughts on the? Do you remember what I said to you, like when I reached out, and more specifically, like Honeybook? That's what we.
I
both
do
used.
remember you reaching out in a pretty professional manner.
Okay.
Which I thought was good.
I don't remember what. I'll be honest, I don't.
No, I just remember like seeing your website, like seeing your work, thinking like, okay, this guy knows what he's doing.
Okay.
But you were communicative and things like that, which are things you look for when you're, because you get a bunch of these responses in these ads and you don't really know who's who. And I'm pretty sure we had a brief phone conversation.
Believe so.
And you sounded smart.
Okay.
At the time.
Acting classes worked.
At the time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, like the way you presented yourself was very professional, and I knew that you weren't just some guy that was in it just to shoot. You were trying to like you're.
Did I express that? I can't remember. Like, I can recall. I think what's funny. Like, I'm gonna admit this. Like, we might have talked about this, where I definitely, based on your portfolio and based on speaking to you initially, it was like, this guy has experience. This guy has been in the industry. I don't know how long he's been in the industry, but he's definitely been. when it came to me and like second shooters were new to me. That whole concept. Oh, wait, you're telling me that you like there's someone that just shows
can
up
help
and
you?
just, yeah, people
Someone
help
can
you.
help you?
People help you,
Right.
and you get paid to help.
Yeah,
What?
yeah.
Like that was a new concept to me because I had only experienced one man show. Like you need to be someone that is diverse in audio and visuals, and being a quote unquote director, right? Like
Yep.
being able to direct a crowd.
One man band.
Exactly. So hearing all that and understanding like, okay, now there's this thing called second shooter. So Honeybook thing I use to contracts and not sponsored by any means. If they want to pay us, they can.
You can if you want. I'll take
But
it.
they, hearing all that, or sorry, someone's walking by. I got distracted. Hearing, oh yeah. So there's a community, people asking, record job postings.
Yeah, the job listing
So
service.
I can't remember. I had used it once before, and I might have told you about this. This was peak COVID, and being a one-man band. I don't want to get away from our story, but I just want to share this really quickly. One-man band, and I got COVID. So I'm like, cool. I have a gig that a contract was signed, and I got paid to show or to be there, and like I can't. And by the way, I didn't have the funds to like really refund.
Right.
So that's where like the pressure for me was like, I need to find someone.
Yeah.
So I went on Honeybook. I was like, wait, Honeybook has this thing. So I put out a posting, and I don't think I knew you. I had known you yet, or had replied.
Not.
And luckily I met Stanley.
Nice.
So Stanley had he was in Brooklyn at the time, I think, and so he had covered that gig for me. And that to me was like an eye opener. It was like out of desperation, like looking for someone. I'm not sure if that was the case for you with second shooters or Honeybook. How had you in the past or worked with second shooters?
I had used second shooters before, like mutual friends in the industry, but not necessarily. I don't think necessarily wedding industry.
Okay.
Like not. I think you might have been one of the first people that also was essentially running their own wedding videography production. Like otherwise it was friends that shoot in commercial spaces or otherwise that would come and help me. But it wasn't a regular thing until I went through the similar journey of eventually being like, if I'm gonna scale, if I'm gonna grow, I gotta stop doing this by myself. I can't keep doing this alone. Like I can't be shooting a wedding alone. Like I'm never gonna not only bring the quality up, but I'm not gonna be able to do the creative stuff I want to do. I'm not gonna be able to work with different clients because I'm just doing weddings all the time, and I'm grateful for it and everything, but building that community is so important.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely grateful to have found, services like Honeybook and even Facebook. You can go on and you can find other shooters, and yeah, like connecting with you through there obviously has made an impact, and the other guys that I've met through there as well. It's like this community of creatives. But going back into our story, so then you showed up at this wedding and you forgot your camera. And I was just like, no.
I think I remember. It was the one in Jersey City, right?
Yeah, it was at Batello,
Yeah.
in Jersey City. Beautiful venue, right by the water. And that wedding, I think it's the top wedding on my website still.
I think you had mentioned to me, you had shared this with me, was that like you didn't budget, they didn't pay for a second shooter.
So,
right? So touch on that. I'm very I think that's very important for people that are in the business.
So it's interesting too because I've done this a few times within weddings specifically, let's say, where a client will contract me, let's say for one videographer, but I know that their event or this shoot, let's say, is going to be an opportunity for me to level up my production and add to my portfolio in a way that I haven't had the opportunity to before. So in that case, they only booked one videographer, I believe, but I decided to invest in a second videographer in yourself because I said, excuse me, I've never worked.
Yeah, I've been doing the same thing.
At the time, I hadn't worked in one of those at one of those venues. Higher end, you could say.
You have the view of, by the way,
at the
just
waterfront. You could see
waterfront. Yeah.
You could see One World Trade in the background, very beautiful. So I was like, I need to have a second shooter to elevate this experience. And that's when I decided to invest in you to bring you on, and it paid off because look what happens. Like, I ended up at the time creating the best video, like the best wedding video I had ever made. And then now that lives in my website, and now you got clients saying, I want that video for my wedding. Yeah. I want that. I want that. I want that.
Use that as the example of like the standard.
Yeah.
Hey, I want something.
And
like
the thing is, the previous best video, that's what people were saying about that one, and the previous about that one.
Yeah.
So like, I'm always trying to find ways to elevate the experience for my clients and just in general for myself too. to keep things fresh, but also to reinvest in your business to essentially level things up.
Right. And I think that's a super important thing to touch on. So that wedding, which by the way, at least for me, it was the first wedding I had done in Jersey City. Like other than working with the company that I was working with, we had done like maybe Rockland, whatever. So just like more up north.
Yeah.
So it was refreshing to be like in Jersey City and like this is a really nice spot. The W Hotel, like that was where the getting ready was, and it was my first time second shooting for a company. So like I'm not a one-man band, but I remember telling myself, I like going in, it was like, hey, like you don't know what's gonna happen from here. Best thing you can do is treat my whole saying is like treat others how you want to be treated.
Absolutely.
You know, coming in, if I wanted a guy like myself to be second shooting, what would I want him to do? Would I want him to take initiative? Would I want him to ask questions like, you know, not to be what's the word I'm trying to look for? Like, not to be annoying, but to be like, hey, I'm invested. Like, you tell me, what do you need? What do you need help with? Like, where can I bring the load off of you? Because I want to show you, hey, I'm grateful for this this opportunity, although I'm getting paid and although all this stuff.
And just to say real quick, like that's one thing that I appreciated about you and why I kept bringing you on to second shoot for me, because I noticed you were proactive. I noticed you were, you know, going the extra mile. Like if you if you had 5 minutes of downtime, you weren't saying, okay, let me get on my phone and check my emails. Like you were like, hey, what can I do? Or you were getting B-roll here or talking to the client. Like you were figuring things out as if you were part of like my business or with me and helping problem solve, which I think is huge because to be honest, the people I might have not ever hit back up again, it's maybe because they weren't as proactive and they're not bringing that value, you know, to the table. And that's like, I agree. Like when you said treat people how you want to be treated, I feel like that's something I've tried to do my entire life. I just feel like that's how you should be when you're building relationships and just as a person, just as an individual. But in business, that's invaluable. And as a creative coming up, that's invaluable too, because that's what people are going to remember you for, and that's what people are going to hire you for. It's not just your skills. It's not just like if your footage is absolutely incredible,
but you're a dickhead,
but you're a jerk, or you're only going to film like half the time, and you're just kind of like being lackadaisical about stuff. I don't care how good your work is. Like I'm not working with you again.
Yeah, 100%. I've had. So after that experience, like then, you know, as just with anything, if you do something long enough, you'll end up getting bigger opportunities. So one thing I want to share story-wise is investing in yourself, right? So just how important it was. Hey, you were thinking in second order consequences. You weren't thinking of how much money am I going to make from this one wedding. You were thinking how much money could potentially come in by investing into this, right?
The long game.
So for me, there was the exact same thing where I was working for this company doing promo videos, and then I had no weddings under my belt. So I was like, hey, you know, promo video as cool as it is and as hype as it is, it's not a wedding film. So how can I get a wedding film under my belt when I don't know anyone in the industry like that? I don't necessarily have friends my age getting married. I was, I think, 18 at the time. So I didn't know anyone getting married. I was like, sure, I can wait around 25, you know, as I get older and start to get those, hey, you do videos, right? Like you have those friends that probably hit you up. But like, I was like, okay, I need to create my own opportunity. So long story short, destination wedding comes up. Friend of a friend of the entertainment company got him flown out. Hey, Brian, we like your work. We want you to do a promo because we think this will help our business, you know, book more destination weddings. And hey, business smart. I like it. But we can't afford to bring you out. We can only pay for half. And so I'm like, okay, so I'm getting paid half. Getting paid half. I'm only getting my expenses covered half. I'm not getting paid to shoot, but my payment is covering half of my expenses. And so I have an option to say, hey, it just doesn't make sense for me. Or I could say, okay, what am I gonna get from this? Okay, I get to hang out in DR. It's gonna be 3 days. I'm gonna be working, the initial job opportunity was you're only gonna cover rehearsal dinner, you're gonna cover the wedding day. You get an extra night to do whatever you want. All-inclusive resort, right? That was the pitch.
Yep.
But ultimately for me, I saw that and I was just like, okay, that's cool, but I could do that on my own time. What can I really get from this? So I took it upon myself to say, hey, I'm gonna make a film from this. Client doesn't know me. Client doesn't even know I exist, but I'm gonna pay half. I ended up paying, I was like $800 out of my own pocket to go to DR to work. So I go out there, shoot the promo. I have all this amazing footage, but I get up 5 a.m. after drinking the night before to get that sunset footage, because I'm like, no one, I don't see a lot of videographers with sunset footage in a destination like this. I'm like, I'm gonna make sure I am taking full advantage of this. I could have relaxed and we're, oh my God, I'm in DR. But I was like, I'm not gonna get the opportunity to film a wedding in DR. That's very specific, that opportunity. So,
well, it's about making your own opportunities, because like, for example, like I have a metric for these sort of situations where, you know, maybe an opportunity comes and money-wise, it's not ideal, right? But like you said, you have a choice. You have to decide if I'm gonna make half the amount of money that I would want for this, where's the value in this? Like, how can I turn this into a valuable experience for me that's gonna pay dividends down the line?
Yeah.
And to be honest, there's some situations where that's not possible, and that's the ones where you have your boundaries and you're like, sorry, thank you, whatever. But every now and then, there's something you haven't done before like that, and that's where it pays off. When it's something new, when it's something that you could add onto your website or your portfolio that now says, okay, look what I'm capable of, and then that in turn will bring you more business down the line.
100%. I'm just gonna check to see if it stopped rolling.
He's gonna check the camera.
It has 30 minutes record time.
I'm gonna take this opportunity to tell you all
about our
how
sponsor
much
today.
of a bad person this guy is.
Okay.
You should not hire him. Don't talk to him. If he reaches out to you, he's a bad person.
Yeah, it stopped
He's
rolling.
acting like he's a good person. He's not. It's really bad. I'm only here.
I'm holding him hostage.
Yeah,
I held
I'm
him
not
at
here.
gunpoint.
I'm here totally against my will. That's what this is about. Did it stop at some point?
Yeah, I did. I don't know where, but
All right.
I just rolled on it. I'm just gonna time it. All right, so it's 30 minutes. Yeah, so like you were saying, creating opportunity. I think like thinking in the long term, and I even look back like just to share my journey. It was like if I looked at it, it's like, hey, this is gonna buy me my next piece of equipment. This is gonna let me get wireless microphones, and that to me back then was like, dude, like, I made big time now. I'm big.
That's a big deal.
I'm in the big times now. And it's so crazy how our relationship with equipment changes over time. Like, at least for me now, like one thing I purchased was like the Tiffin Pro filter. It's like the little details. $200 is just like, to me, that didn't hurt as much as like dropping on an FX6, like, right?
Yeah.
But there's levels to it. And I think people look at it and it's just like, oh my God, I'm never gonna get to an FX6.
Well, that's what I thought. I mean, I when I bought it, so
this guy owns an FX6, by the way.
no, but so even more so than the equipment, like if you're focused, I was having this conversation with Dylan last night. This was part of the convo that I told you that I had with him.
Shout out Dylan.
Shout out to Dylan Spangler, DS Films. I hope I said your last name right, but thank you for all your help, man. So we were talking about how when you set goals and you're goal oriented and you're doing 2 5-year goals, 10-year goals, you're gonna hit those goals a lot faster than you think when you have that mindset, as opposed to just being like, one day I want to do that, but not really making an action plan. Because the FX6, for example, I didn't think I was gonna get a cinema cam right now. Like, I didn't think that felt like something so far away.
Yeah.
But even like starting a business, for example, because I didn't even know I wanted to start a business till I want to say I was 24 or 25.
Okay.
Because again, like out of college, I wasn't able to get a job, so I was just focused on getting work. I wasn't thinking about being an entrepreneur to that degree and all that stuff. I felt like it was almost impossible, right?
Yeah.
But as I grew in my career and the industry and stuff, when I was 25, I said, okay, at 33 years old, I want to start a business. I said, let me use these years to get experience to start a business at 33. And then I quit my job and started a business at 28. Because I was hustling so hard to be like, at 33, I'm gonna start my own company.
Yeah.
You know, so being goal oriented and shooting big like that, it's how you get things done.
Was there ever a time where you felt like you did that, you had the proven success, and where there was a time where you set that goal and you may not have hit it? Was there ever that time?
Where I set a goal and I wasn't.
And you just didn't hit it?
I mean, yeah. I mean, I would say definitely. You know, so there was a time I was gonna quit video production altogether.
Because
I just felt So it was earlier on in my career again, but
Freelancing when you decided to
before
freelance?
freelancing.
Okay, before.
This is like, sorry, I'm backtracking. The
You're good, you're
timelines,
good.
the timeline's all messed up. But before that point where I had the confidence that I said I'm going to start my own business and all that stuff, I was just trying to make it in video production in general. And, you know, it just wasn't working. I wasn't landing the work for it. I got fired one time, and when I got fired, the guy straight up told me, look, I think you're not meant for this. You're meant to be an account director or whatever, like,
Okay.
you know, more like on the business side.
Yeah.
And, you know, that I took that pretty personally, and you know, it was discouraging. And I actually started to believe that I wasn't capable of doing video production, that I wasn't capable of doing this professionally in any capacity.
Yeah.
But then where I got lucky is, shout outs to the folks at MRM McCann when I worked over there. I ended up getting a job where I was more of an executive assistant role. But they gave me opportunities to do video production here and there to help build my portfolio. And I was surrounded by a lot of encouraging people that were trying to connect me, that were telling me, no, you're good at this, you should do this, you know, which is a huge contrast from where I just came from,
Yeah.
where I'm being told, no, like,
Yeah.
you can't do this. So, so that would be a time where I was going through a moment where it was like, you know what, maybe this isn't gonna happen.
What do you think you would say? So just to talk about the timeline a little bit more, but what was that? You don't have to name drop the job that you left that they had that negative mindset. But how old were you at that time when you were working there?
I was 24.
Okay, so 24. Your circle of group of friends, is it mainly your coworkers? Is it mainly the people that you hang out with today? Like, what did your personal life look like
So
when working at that job?
So at the time, you know, most of my friends from college and from that time in my life are not in the industry, I should say. So like I didn't really have that community of people that can relate to my industry. You know, like for example, a lot of the things that everyone was saying at the time about how to navigate your career applied to their career paths, but for me, it didn't apply at all. And like
Yeah.
me trying to
Can you give
apply.
some examples? Like what they would say?
I guess for example, like our industry is a lot more portfolio based, let's say, than it is resume based.
Okay.
For example, if
Right,
that makes
yeah,
sense.
100%.
You know, so
Yeah, I don't look at your awards or your
yeah.
credentials.
So like
yeah.
so like anything that any club or leadership role, whatever that might have done in college or whatever, it doesn't mean anything.
Right.
Right. And
Gotcha,
like
gotcha.
and certain internships didn't mean anything because it's okay, that's fine, but where's your work?
Right.
Right. So for example, that took me a while to like really hone in on in the beginning because again, I wasn't surrounded by other creatives in terms of, you know, at least my immediate circle. But at that place that I was working at, you know, I did meet some really great creatives that I learned a lot from, and I started to learn a lot more video production things from. But they ran into the same roadblocks, of course, because at the time it was basically the management that wasn't able to guide us in that direction, or was, I guess, putting the fault on us.
Gotcha.
In terms of the overall creative. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
in a
No,
way?
because for me, like mine was completely different, right? Like dropping out of college, I didn't necessarily make any friends in college.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like I had any pull anywhere. It was just like
Yeah.
creating opportunities. So I come from a background of like, you were actually the first person that I would consider like a creative friend, like that I
This guy's
ha-
saying he's my friend I just met. Nuts.
that where it's like community, right? Everyone
Yeah,
talks
yeah.
about community. It's like, fuck, where's my community?
Yeah,
like I don't
yeah.
have one. Like, where do I find this community? And
Yeah.
I had the people that I worked with in the entertainment company, but you know, the guys are like, it just didn't line with my goals or where I wanted to go long term. So, you know, it didn't feel like my tribe or my community. And that's the one thing that kept running through my mind was like finding your tribe. And it was like, everyone talks about being patient and like you'll find them. And it's like, okay. So then what I realized, at least now having more of a community, is saying like, what is my backbone? What are the things that I want to stand for, the things I don't want to stand for? So that way, you know, we live in a world now where it's like, it's hard to necessarily share your backbone. But, you know, when you do find someone that does have similar backbone, it's like, oh, like Spider-Man, like, right. And that's how it felt. So, you know, like, I would definitely say, at least, but going back to that, right? You don't just find that. You go through, okay, I don't have a backbone. It's very lonely. It's, you know, like skipping family events. You know, I'll never forget, like my mom think it was like for someone's birthday. It's just like, I can't go. Like, I have to work. I have to make this happen. I have to do something. Like, no one's gonna do this for me.
Yeah.
No one's gonna. I don't have an editor. I don't have any of this stuff. Like, I have to do this stuff. So, but now, you know, going through those years, keep in mind years, not months,
Yep.
of loneliness, to then now have something like this, like a relationship. It's so refreshing, because it's like, I remember what it was like. You know, not to take anything away from you, but like, if this didn't happen, hey, I'd still be able to do what I have to do.
Of course.
But it makes life that much better. And I think this is what life's about, is like building that community, the
Yep.
camaraderie. Like, that's the one thing. And this is why or at least for me, like, why I wanted to do this was like to help just share that. And the more saturated the industry becomes,
Yeah.
the more important it is to just, hey, don't lose sight of, like, yes, it's very saturated, but understand this is very common in the industry of saturation. You're gonna be lonely. You're gonna be doing things. There's gonna be nights where you're losing your mind. Like this is very normal.
Yep. And
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say that's why I think I'm leaning so much towards this more producer mindset, because that sense of community. I love bringing people together. Like, I've loved bringing other creatives together that are doing all this stuff on your own. But it's like, no, we could all eat. We could all help each other.
Yep.
And you know, it took me a while to shed that lone wolf mindset.
Yeah.
Because I felt like, no, I gotta know how to do all this stuff and all that. But also, it's like you said, it's hard to find people with similar mindsets that are also view things, because there are a lot of creatives out there, but there's so many different kinds of creatives, and at least for me, like going back to the creative suit concept, like I gravitate towards people that have that sort of trajectory or see that for themselves, that hybrid, because I feel like it's more relatable in the way that we work.
So do you think, because I want to touch on this, so just for the viewer watching, or right, hi mom, I want to make sure I touch on, like, I'm not in the wedding industry for a specific reason, and that's because I did experience, well, part of the reason was I experienced that a lot of the competition, or like just that industry, there's great people, but majority of what you're gonna run into, at least in my experience, is gonna be outperforming one another. Like, there are the dime a dozen that are quality. I'll never forget Nydia, I believe her name is.
Nydia.
She was great. Like, I absolutely.
Nydia's awesome to work with.
Yep. Nydia Photography, I think.
Nydia Lloyd.
Like, meeting her, that person, I was like, this is great. Like, why are not people like this?
Right.
Like, have great energy, be a good person. Like, you know, and so I just kept doing work that that became unfulfilling, at least in my case. And now, you know, having more control in like who I bring into certain projects with certain clients, like, I like having that, because it allows me to just filter out the people that have egos. I'll never forget, not gonna name the person, but like, guy from New York was just like, I was trying to be as helpful as possible. And it was just like, again, I don't expect you to bring the same energy as me, but like, at least like have some like decency of like communication. Like, listen,
and look, listen, this is what I like to say. We as photographers and videographers, we're not saving lives.
Yeah.
Like what we do is great and meaningful to people, of course, but humble yourself and remember that like what you're doing is not a necessity, you know? So to me, it's like, for example, there was this one photographer that I went into the wedding day, and he's sitting down with his camera, and I go to shake his hand. I'm like, hey, my name's Jesse. Nice to meet you. Can't wait to work together today. Guy doesn't even look me in the face. And he's just looking at his camera, and he's like, hey. And I'm just like, okay, that sets the tone for the day.
That's the vibe.
That sets the tone. So I'm like, all right, I know what kind of individual. Like, at this point, it's, the way I deal with it is I'm like, okay, I know what kind of individual this is.
Yeah.
So now I know what kind of day it's going to be, so I know how to adjust. Whereas opposed to like, you know, a Nydia, for example, high energy, super happy, easy to work with, is a team player going into it, because that team player mindset is something that's that photographer videographer dynamic sometimes that doesn't always mesh, because sometimes you work with people that aren't seeing it as we're part of the overall team for the couple. They see it as I'm the photographer, I'm the videographer. This is like, they see it as a portfolio piece almost. Like, they go into it as that.
And I do want to say though, I do want to like, because I'm someone at least that I say like, you also have to take full accountability for your actions, because there's things like, for example, I wouldn't, like when early on in my career, like I wouldn't go up to people. I wouldn't establish the tone, right? And that can lead to awkwardness. That could lead to like indirect, like, oh, he's messing up my shot. Well, I never introduced myself in the first place, so how could I blame him, right? I think a lot of people get caught in that, you know, he's automatically a bad guy because he got in my shot. Well, it's like, did you go up to him? Did you at least
communicate? Did you come up with a game plan, like for the ceremony? Like, did you say where you're gonna stand, where you're gonna be?
Now, if you do, and then he still says, fuck you, I'm going in anyway, I don't care. Like, then you can establish that. You have the right. But I think a lot of people get caught in they're like self-inflicting ego of saying, that guy has an ego. Well, you have an ego for telling him he has an ego.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying? So it's interesting.
It's paradoxical a little bit.
That's why I don't do weddings. But that's I think it's super important, like touching on things like this, and I'm not sure how long we want to go with this, but ultimately, like one thing I did see for this podcast is just like having some conversation. Like, what's the goal, right? What's the purpose? Hey, if there are other people that see that backbone, going back to the backbone reference, like, and say I line up with that, like I would want to have a conversation like the same way I do now. Like there's this guy online, Iman Gatsi, people might know him, but like I can't help, I've never met him in my life, but he has provided me so much value via online that I can't help but be like, dude, this guy is such a solid dude. Now, yes, is there the small chance that he's an online personality and he could be a fluke? Sure. But I can't help but be like, what's the downside in believing in a lot of things that you say? Like one of the quotes is "death before dishonor." Like that like hit me so differently. I'm like, that's so true. Like there's so many people nowadays that don't have honor, and like when you find someone that does have honor, and he said this in one of his content was like loyalty is is very rare, but you have to understand what loyalty is. It's picking a side. It's choosing that regardless of how it's going to be seen, like I'm on this side and I'm going to stay here and I'm not going to move. I'm just going to stay 10 toes down with this people, with this group, like Spartans. Like that's like my mindset is like, I want to find Spartans. I want to find the people that are like going to be like, they have so much confidence in themselves and it doesn't happen overnight, but they're just so sure of themselves of like what I want. This is what I want. I'm not here for no BS, no fluff, no anything. Like, this is what I'm here for. I'm here to either be a good person or I'm here to make money, whatever it is. Like, again, it doesn't have to be the same, but just you know what you want.
But that transparency in knowing who you are and being willing to express that to others and not being like wishy-washy and trying to fit into a mold, trying to be like, sometimes I like that, whatever. Like, no, just tell me straight up how it is.
Yeah.
What is it that you like? What is it that you don't? Because I think we even do that with each other sometimes. Like, we'll be really honest and like, I'm not willing to do this, but I'll do that.
Yeah.
And it's like, it doesn't ruin the relationship. I appreciate that there are things that you're about and there's other things that you're not about. And that's cool because that's who you are.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of people too so one thing I want to touch on, because I feel like it can get lost in translation, is like you, for example, I think you've earned the right to say, I don't want to do this. Right? When you're starting out, I don't think you can really say that, right? Like you can't be a guy year one and come in and like, I'm not really like imagine putting a job posting out. I'm looking for an editor, right? He's like, I don't really like do edits. So like, you have anything else for me? It's like, I'm looking for an editor. Right? So like, I feel like a lot of people too, with videographer, especially in the wedding industry or even in the industry in general, is like, how much value, this is at least my mindset. How can I be such so diverse and so good where I'm irreplaceable?
Well, you got to think about what you're bringing to the table before you start saying, what am I going to get out of this? Like, there's something that you have to be bringing.
Right.
You can't just say, give
value
me.
First.
You gotta give.
Yep.
You gotta give to get. You can't just take.
Yep. And there was a post recently. It was like, when we're doing business, our philosophy is providing so much value and asking for very little. Now, for everyone that might be different. Your value might be worth $100,000, and so your ask might be $20,000. But me, I'm only offering $100 worth of value, and I'm asking for what you're asking for, $20,000. Like the value that doesn't line up, your value versus your ask. So I really
it's
think
a self-awareness level, certain level of self-awareness you have to have.
Yeah.
when it comes to that.
100%. 100%. What do you? I'm very curious. So, we talked briefly, just to also enlighten the people about how this came to be. It was like, hey, you thought about? Have you ever thought about starting a podcast? I've always thought about starting a podcast. We're all the creators out there. The idea's there, but it's like, I look like a douche if I'm talking to a camera by myself.
So it's like, well, what I do like about it is that it speaks to that idea of community, right? Of building community. I think this is something that will help with that because again, similar people with similar ideas or people that even want to come on and contribute and have these discussions. I think it's important because again, being a creative can be a very lonely journey.
Yep.
And having these conversations is great. It's almost therapeutic in a way too, because you know we can relate to each other on these things that we can't talk about with most people. Like, but yeah, like I've struggled with the idea of creating content for myself, which is so interesting,
And
right?
you create such great pieces for your clients, right? But when it comes to yourself,
I can't do it. It's like, yeah, and I find it kind of funny in a way because yeah, we're like for clients, I'm there all day, but for myself, because there's that feeling of like, who am I?
Yep.
Who am I to put this camera here and start talking and start creating content? Or especially because so much of the work that we create is so dramatic and so you know cinematic and whatever word you want to use.
Deep, right?
It's
Like,
deep. It's profound. So it's like, who am I to create these things for myself?
Right.
But when you bring in another individual, and now it's about us connecting and building community. I feel something about it makes me feel more comfortable, or it makes it make more sense for me.
I think the key word comes down to trust, right? Like
Yeah.
I trust this person to be so much that I could be vulnerable with them.
Right.
Of saying, hey man, like I've never said this out loud, but like I've always wanted to create this piece, but I've always had this like, I don't even want to call it insecurity, but just it doesn't feel right for me to create it by myself.
Yeah.
I need to have someone to bounce that idea off of where I can be fully transparent. I know you're not gonna like attack me for seeing it like that.
Not yet.
It's gonna be more of like, hey, I'm gonna get a brain to bounce off of because you have a whole different perspective. Now I can maybe see it differently and think now it's that much better because you had that input, right? Social Samaritan. I don't know if you want to talk about like just briefly, not about the piece specifically, but like what you were able to get out of it from a creator standpoint, working with other people, someone that's worked rarely on big film sets, guys that have worked on film sets, like what would you say you learned from that experience?
So just a little bit of background. Essentially, I'm starting my own short film series. It's an anthology that I started writing these ideas during the pandemic because a lot of downtime indoors, but also it's like it's like we were all forced to stop, and I finally got to be like, okay, let me tap into my creative side. Like, let me write, because we all got into this originally to create these creative pieces, right? I mean, the business is great, wonderful, but that's not what the original love of the craft was about. And I kind of lost that at some point. So I got to stop, write these ideas. And it's an opportunity to work with creatives like yourself, like Ariel, like Harley, excuse me, like Yosmi, and create something purely for the love of it. But Social Samaritan and these other pieces in that series they tap into more like mental health issues and challenges that we all face. And many of them are very, very personal stories that I finally get to exercise and put out into the world. And it feels good because again, I feel blessed to have the opportunity to take all this gear and all these experiences that I've amassed over the years and finally make something for myself.
Yeah.
And in a way though, where like, again, it used to feel selfish to do that, but now it's like, it doesn't feel selfish. It feels more like an exercise. It feels like fun. I don't know. It feels like an experience.
Yeah. And by the way, if I haven't said this to you, but like for me, it gave me a sense of like knowing that, I might not have wrote the piece or had any idea about the piece, but knowing that I'm able to bring some sort of value, I'm quote unquote valuable to someone with something like, hey, BTS photo, whatever it is, like that to me is fulfilling for me, right? And I don't want to just like be like, oh, like some people get caught up in the idea of like, oh, I'm doing the favor for this guy and all this other stuff. Like what's it, like you said, what's in it for me?
Right,
Versus
right.
for me, it was like, well, Jesse's actually, like, he could have asked anyone else. He's asking me, right? So I look at that and I just say, hey, again, if I end up having a personal piece, I hope one day I can reach out to Jesse and have that same level of like, you know,
Probably gonna
proactiveness,
say no.
intimacy. Probably gonna say no. Probably gonna say, hey man, game's on. I can't do it.
No, but I mean the thing is too, like, the people that I brought onto that project are people that not only I see value in bringing them on, but it's people that I trust, and it's people that I can say I want to create with them, like specifically, like it's and it's people that multiple times throughout my career have shown me that like they can be there for me, and like, and I'm willing to be there for them and stay away from me. Just keep that distance. All right, but
I try to put my hand on his shoulder to have that like.
but no, seriously,
Yeah.
it's just like people that I want to keep creating with, and that I want to be on this journey with together. And again, I'm just in a zone right now where it's about community after like so many years of almost feeling a loss of community. That, and I'm telling you, like, from when I graduated, because in college, I feel like I had a huge sense of community, just not even regarding to creative stuff, just the circle that I had, right? And one of the things that I think mentally messed with me the most afterwards, which is completely feeling like I lost that sense of community. It just wasn't the same. And I feel like now, with the circle that we're building creatively, it's like I'm getting this opportunity to once again get that sense of community. But now it's mixed with my passions and mixed
Right.
with my work, and it just brings it all to a whole new level. So it's exciting.
I know I've been sort of asking different questions and sort of
Tired of these
driving.
questions.
Yeah. So leaving the floor to you, what's something that maybe you want to touch on or talk about or open the doors to in regards to conversation? Again, there's no necessarily strategy. There's no strategy when it comes to this type of recording. We just sort of set up and we're like, hey, we're going to talk about whatever. On the agenda was like, hey, establishing who we are, what we're about.
Well,
But-
let's talk about what you brought up before, about the importance of getting some downtime when you're creative. What are your thoughts about that? Like, because we're all so go, and like the world's always like hustle. You gotta always be filming, always be creating. Like why is it important to pause every now?
I think what I learned recently, and I just want to quickly touch on a story that happened to me. Like last year, I was not, like, I was burnt out. I had a bunch of work, meaning like, you know, just wedding edits, and I just did not want to touch them. I had a lot of downtime, and I use quotation marks for downtime because it wasn't real downtime. It was just I'm replacing my time with doing this instead of that, right? So I want to cover what that means is people. I feel like you don't deserve downtime unless you're really busy. So I think once you get to a point of, okay, I have my 15-hour workday, at least, or like time that I'm awake, 15 hours. What do I want to allocate towards that? So for me, I started doing combat sports. So it was like, okay, that's going to take 2 hours of my time. So that means I only have 13 hours left. And then, you know, all these other things, 8 hours of sleep, obviously, which contributes to that 24-hour day. So still 13 hours. But you then find these moments of being so busy and then saying, okay, where's the down, or like, where's my downtime? And for a lot of us, we don't have that downtime, or we don't, you know, and because the reason why I want to, like, I'm being so specific and trying to be careful with how I'm delivering is because, like, people look at us and they're like, you're your own boss. What are you talking about? You don't have downtime. Like, you can work, right? You can, you have 24 hours in a day to do whatever you want. You're your own boss. What do you mean downtime? You don't deserve that. What do you mean? You don't work a 9 to 5. You don't have
No, I mean, like, for example, like there's something I struggled with recently, and I had to start really setting hard boundaries with this kind of stuff because I have people that will call me in the middle of the day and be like, it could be like noon or 1 p.m. or whatever. Well, you're different because, well, I'm talking about conversations not in a business context.
Okay.
Like asking to go do something or a favor or whatever. But the thing is, it's like, there's this weird assumption because you're your own boss that you just get to do whatever you want, like at any point in the day. So it's like, hey, you're home, right? Yeah, I'm home. Why? Oh, can you come do this for me or whatever? It's like, I'm home, but I'm working. Like
Yeah.
I'm in work mode. So to me, it's about setting that boundary of like, from this hour to this hour, I'm in office. Pretend I'm not even home. Pretend I'm in an office somewhere. Like when people used to have 9 to 5s in an office, right? Pretend it's that. Pretend it's
Yep.
like I'm not home, and it the thing is too, it changes, right? Because my office hours aren't the same every day. It's fluid. It's changing. So, but for me, it's about like having that boundary where it's like, look, if it's not urgent, I'm focused on my work. Then when I'm off work hours, that's time for everything else.
But then you also get caught, right? Like for us, I don't know about you, but for there are days now. So touching on the story that I wanted to touch on last year of like having not downtime but free time to do whatever I want, and I didn't choose to work. To now being to setting up a system and really being honed in on that system of like this is what I do from this time to this time.
Yep.
And you do that so much where now I don't want to say it ever becomes a 9 to 5. I used this analogy before, and I think I've used it with you. Is like I don't believe in work-life balance. I believe in work-life integration.
Yeah.
And because there's an integration between work and life, there needs to be some sort of like some people are more productive in the morning. So for you, if your office hours are from 6 a.m. to 12 p.m. and then you're closed until and you open up till 4, like whatever it is, that works for you. For me, at least what I come to realize is I'm not, I need my 8 hours of sleep. I usually wake up at 8 a.m. And then first 4 hours of the day are all admin, sort of sit down computer work.
Yep.
And then it isn't until the afternoon where I start to like be actively traveling, meetings, like if they're in person, shoots like that. Like I'll usually schedule these things.
Video shootings, video filming.
Video
filming.
Video.
Just
Disclaimer.
covering that real quick.
Video shooting.
Filming.
I'll do that in the afternoon, and it's
Yeah.
because, and it also works for my clients. Like tomorrow, I'm doing a shoot 1:30 afternoon, and I always make sure to end at 6 p.m. And because, hence, I have my training in the afternoon. That's like a non-negotiable for myself. So people a lot of times like look at downtime and be like, oh, that's free time. It's like, no, it's just having your things that help you become more productive, which then help your work.
Yep. Because
Right?
it's a system, and that's something that, as a creative, takes a long time, I feel like, to really figure out.
Yeah.
Especially because in the beginning, it's all about, I need to say yes to everything.
Yeah.
And I'm saying yes to everybody.
For
go
yeah,
ahead.
like downtime, like I used to think of downtime as like watching YouTube videos.
Right.
That's not downtime. That's work, at least in my case.
Yeah, you're still
So-
actively involved in that space. And the thing is, so me personally, I now intentionally, 2 days out of the week, I'm not doing anything work related. Like, and I mean like nothing. Like not even like, oh yeah, like you said, watching a tutorial. Those are the days that I'm spending time with friends or family, or I'm going on bike rides, hiking, something different. Because also I feel like it's not only about recharging, it's also about, I get inspired by living life. Like
Yep.
my work gets inspired by living my life. And when I was in the stage where I was just nothing but work and I wasn't setting those boundaries and intentionally making that time to live my life, I noticed that I wasn't being as creative anymore, and I wasn't enjoying my work as much anymore, because you don't get that time to step away and kind of like get inspired by life, but also appreciate other things.
Right.
So it's very important I think to have that for sure.
Yeah, I think, and just hence why we're outside. Like one thing we have in common is like, hey, like being outdoors tends to be a recharge for us. Like for me, one thing I started to instill with one of my clients because they had introduced me to it. Shout out Poly Twins, was breath work. And this guy's doing something. What are you doing? Breath work. What is that? Like never heard of it. Is that like meditation? It's like no, you regulate your breathing, and then you start to hear with common people, and that's another thing too. At least what I learned is like you surround yourself with a community. Like not only is it important to create a community, but like even in work, that's a community in itself. Like how many referrals did you get that are your favorite clients and they refer you to someone just like them because they're in the same
Right.
not only industry, but they speak the same, they have the same attitudes, same viewpoints towards life.
Yep.
And so like can't help but look at my life and say health and wellness is like, it's almost like a cheat code. It's like I'm taking the benefits of what I'm learning, establishing myself, water, making sure I'm hydrated, the things that are good for us. Yeah, actually, I
my
can fill you
little
up.
baby water, can you give me
Fill
some
you
of
up.
that? Hit
Yeah,
me.
of
Hit me.
Community.
Hell yeah. Where'd you get this water from?
My house,
Nice.
or BJ's more specifically.
That's good stuff. Thank you.
So like that's another thing too, is also seeing it. I think a lot of people look at just changing, not to change topics, but like free time. What do you do on your free time? It's like, I don't necessarily have free time. Like, I don't think we have free time. We
Yeah.
just choose what we want to do with our time. That happens to be work and have a life. A lot of people that work 9 to 5s and say Monday through Friday I have to work, weekends are their free time for them to do whatever they want to do.
Yeah,
golf or
like I'm the
jog
kind of
or-
person, if you got, if you, sadly, even if you want to just hang out, I got that got to go on my calendar.
Yeah,
It has to go on my calendar.
literally.
Because I'm very intentional about the way I go about every day and every week.
Because also, I don't know about you, but I don't set boundaries on weekends. Like weekends, Sundays are optional for me of like giving myself the choice to say, I could do some very, very light work, right? Going back to like watching YouTube videos work,
Yeah.
research, things like that. Like I could just do that because I'm actively just curious and I don't want to set a limit. Oh, I got to wait till Monday to do that. Like why would I? I could do it right now. Why would I not? So, and I think it's, and of course, let's state the obvious here. We have our own business, right? What business owner is not actively thinking 24 hours of like, what could I be doing to improve?
Yep.
Where could I be spending time?
It's always in the back of your
tweaking?
mind, no matter what you're doing. You could be at a rave.
Literally.
You're thinking strategy.
Oh, lights. Okay. How much was that cost? How much tickets? Okay, they're selling tickets here at this cost.
Right.
Why did someone buy this ticket? That's literally how my brain works now. Is even at cafes when I go to work is like, I can't help but be like, okay, if I were to open up a cafe, like
Nerd.
you know, what beans am I using? Where am I getting them exported from? Like the manufacturer, the distributing, like all this stuff. It's a lot. But I just think that's how you train your brain to always be on. And I
You're
think
looking for opportunity. That's the thing.
That's also draining,
Yeah.
right? So setting 10 minutes to actively make the intentions of I just want to think of nothing or
You just want to be.
just want to exist,
just
be
wanna
present.
be.
That's
Yep.
it.
Yeah, that's why I love bike rides. I like hiking, even going for walks. I feel like those are the moments where it's just like
Ladies, he is single, so
just existing.
hit him up if you want to do this with them.
I like to go on long walks. Definitely like to go on long walks. But no, I think all that is super important because you need that reset. You need that reset, and yeah.
Just to wrap up, because I want to keep episode 1 within like an hour and a half.
Okay.
What's one thing you want to necessarily work on or like gain from just throwing it out there? Like, what do you look to gain from these conversations or these talks, if anything? Because I don't think I have shit to give you. I'll try, but
No, I think insight. I think inspiration. I mean, I think naturally. I mean, one of the reasons we're doing this is because we already have been having these insightful conversations where
Yeah.
we learn from each other and we pick on each other's brains that lead to cool and great ideas for our actual work.
yep,
So for me, it's just about staying in that inspired mindset, which again, I find that it's easy to lose it if you get so caught up in the work and you get into this hamster wheel of like, repeating the process. But if you're not connecting with others, if you're not having these conversations, the inspiration, it's hard to, for me at least, it's hard to get the inspiration. It's hard to get that spark to
Yeah.
come up with new things and go on new ventures. So for me, really just trying to remain inspired, especially in a world, and for me personally, an age range where people, honestly, I feel like people start to lose that sense of inspiration. People start to, I guess they become very, very much, I guess realist is the right, maybe. I'm just noticing 20s versus 30s. I'm noticing that in the past, everyone was so like full of dreams
Yeah.
and I noticed that in the education space when I work with like college students. You see the light in their eyes. You see like the spark, the passion for the
yeah.
future. And now being in my 30s, I feel like a lot of people that have lost that, and you feel things have dulled down because everyone's now settling into the life, which is fine and dandy. But for me personally, especially as a creative, I never want to lose that sense of adventure. I never want to lose that sense of wonder, that sense of inspiration. You got something in your hair, but I don't want to lose that. So I feel like doing something like this is an exercise in maintaining that.
Very nice. Yeah, and I just want to follow up. I heard a podcast recently. It was like, I never thought of this. It's like quarter life crisis or midlife crisis. It's like, when you think about it, majority of people that have a midlife crisis or a quarterly crisis is when they're actively doing things. They're realizing their worth. like unintentionally, they're realizing like, oh my gosh, I spent all my quarter of my life or half of my life doing this when I could have been doing that, or I need to be like more adventurous. That's why I need to get a tattoo, or like there's something
Right.
your subconscious is telling you. You've been spending so much time putting me down and like not addressing me, when what you're actually doing, and I like to say I'm doing too, is being fully aware of, being self-aware. Hey, I'm not feeling inspired. Okay, let me not force myself to be inspired, but let me do things that are gonna just help me be more present, or things that are gonna bring me joy.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and you know, if I get inspired by it, so be it. But again,
Yep.
it's like it's having that healthy relationship. Again, not a balance, but an integration between like what state are you currently in,
Yeah.
and what do you need to do to get in a different state.
And I feel like I did hit a rut at one point where I was like, where when I snapped out of it, I was like, what do I like to do?
Yeah.
Like, what is it that Jesse likes to do?
Again,
Because
going back to the backbone, right? Like that's
Yeah.
how I look at it.
yeah,
It's like, what does Jesse like to do?
because I feel like I just got to a point where maybe I became all about my work or whatever it was, and then I'm just like, what do I like to do? And then once I started getting into that mindset of like, what do I like to do? What do I just like to do that's not necessarily related to work, but how do I like to live? How would I want to live my life? What does it look like? That's when it started to change, and I started to be like, okay, let me start doing these things with my time intentionally that will continue to keep me in that creative, inspired state of mind.
Yeah. No, very good, very good. I definitely, I'm excited for our next talk, because like going into, at least for me, I look at this as an opportunity, or like just answer my own question of what do I hope to gain from this, is like, hey, you're someone that has more wisdom. You've been around longer, just by proof, right? Like a lot longer.
All right, chill.
And but there's certain, it's interesting to see like, hey, me and Jesse see the same points on this. So like, you know, did that ever change for him when he was 23 and he went through something that helped him? So I can't help but see a repeatable pattern, at least in my own life, of talking with people that have had a different experience. And the reason why I have my backbone or my viewpoint to this day is because I've taken different opinions, and I've been able to say that pretty much lines up with my story or my experience, because I went ahead and did cold outreach and got rejected. So when he talks about his experience of why he does this method of outreach instead of that one, it makes more sense because I was able to do it too, and it makes more sense for me to do it. So like things like that, there's gonna be many different conversations that we can touch on. But I'm really glad that we did this. Sir, I appreciate your time.
It was nice
as
to meet you.
always. Nice to meet you. Thank you for stopping.
I'm
on
gonna
your hike.
continue my walk, and please don't follow me with your creepy cameras.
All right. Be sure to subscribe, all that nice stuff, and yeah, we're figuring out what it's gonna be called, the name, and all this stuff.
Yeah,
So
spaghetti sauce, mustard salad.
whatever. Yeah.
Peace out.
All right. Peace.